Hi folks, this is video number 89 and the title is The Old Barn. This is a remembrance of our old barn. It was probably built in the late 1800s. It was in bad shape even in my earliest memories. Our parents bought this place around the time of my birth in 1949. We, and now I, have 7.5 acres, which is about half woods. It's a long, narrow stretch, not more than 180 feet wide, but it goes up to the top of the hill. The original property was in two parts, about 3 acres across the road. In a previous story, I mentioned my first job rolling bales for Mr. Thomas in those fields. He purchased that side when my parents bought this side. I always wanted to buy that section when Mr. Thomas retired. He retired when I was in the Army and in Vietnam. He gave Dad first dibs on the land, but Dad couldn't afford it and had to pass. Louise was teaching school in Tunkhannock, and with my military pay, we could have qualified for a loan, but no one told us that it was for sale. We missed out. Anyway, back to the barn. The main part of the barn was two-story. It had a walk-in door in the front right downstairs and large swinging door for the loft upstairs. Keep in mind, this was for a 10-acre farm. This farm was bare bones for sure. There were only 2 cow stanchions downstairs made out of rough-cut lumber. The cow's head went in between 2 vertical boards. One pivoted and was held in place at the top with a drop block, also of wood. There were no milking machines or air compressor hookups, just a stool and a pail. I found an old kerosene lantern they used for light. I cleaned it up and put in a new wick. I was about 10 at the time. I still have the lantern. In fact, it's hanging about 3 feet from me now. The globe is fine and it burns nicely when I'm on the porch or the power is out. I'm 69 now, so it must be 100 years old and still works just fine. I don't know how our predecessors harvested their hay, but I'm guessing with just forks and a wagon. There was a pulley arrangement above the loft door. I've seen these in use and assume they must have used some type of clamping fork to lift bunches of hay to the loft. Dad told me that the folks he bought the place from were elderly and had to sell. They were to the point where they were feeding the 2 cows leaves. Haying was too difficult. No kids around here at the time who could have helped out. Added on to the back of the barn was a chicken coop about the same size as the barn, but only single story. The chicken coop probably held about 100 chickens at one time. It too was in bad shape. The windows were missing and the roof was also not the best. The hayloft floor was good. You climbed up a set of steps located just inside the walk-in door to the left. It too was constructed of rough-cut lumber and had about 3-foot wide steps. Deb and I had fun exploring and playing around and in the barn. Mom really gave me what for when she caught me swinging on the loft door 2 stories up. One thing I miss is the large patch of elderberries growing in front of the barn. Mom made some really delicious jelly from those berries. We also had patches of raspberries and blackberries on the property too. Deb and I picked and sold blackberries for 50 cents a quart to a guy who made wine from them. Mom made jelly from those berries too. The entire barn was constructed of rough-cut lumber. That includes the log base and wood floor. In my 11th summer, Dad decided to take the barn down. It turned out to be easier said than done. He figured we could pull it over with the 48 Chevy pickup. He hooked a chain high to the front right corner and gave it a good shot. The old barn didn't budge. I don't remember how Dad finally got it down. I think he cut some timbers partly through and then was able to pull it over. Once it was down, I spent the next 2 summers, when not baling hay, pulling nails and separating good wood from bad. During that process, I found out why the barn would not pull over. The timbers were held together with 12-inch handmade square nails. All the boards were secured with 3 and 4-inch square nails as well. I salvaged a large amount of good lumber. Next, Dad took down the old garage. Dad and his friend Fred Spickerman from West Nicholson used a lot of the lumber to build a new 2-car garage. The following summer, while Dad was working away, I used most of the rest of it to build a shop on the side of the garage. It was 16 by 20. I borrowed a neighbor's 25-foot flatbed and went around their freshly plowed fields and picked all the larger rocks and hauled them home. I threw the rocks into the bottom and broke them up with a sledgehammer and made a good base for concrete that would come sometime later. The shop lasted 45 years, at which time a snow caved in the roof. I had all the outlying buildings hauled away about 5 years ago. There was some lumber left even after all the previous mentioned reuse. The leftover lumber I used to build a A-frame cabin I mentioned in a previous story. There was really only one scary memory I have of the old barn. There were no windows downstairs, just openings. I went down to the barn one morning. I was only 6 or 7 at the time. I opened the walk-in door, and all I remember was seeing a white flash, and I was instantly on my back, wondering, what the heck just happened? A big farm about a half-mile north of us had a big white burly-looking dog named Snowball. Apparently, good old Snowball was out exploring the neighborhood and decided to spend the night in our barn. When he heard me opening the door, I guess he decided it was time to go home. When I opened the door, he did so at full speed and ran me over. It took a bit to figure it out, as all I saw was white and didn't have time to see that it was a dog. He was a good dog. He sure planted a memory in me. I recently constructed a large adjustable target frame down the back and a double-sided shooting table and bench that is now in place on the concrete slab where the shop stood. Now I have a 12 by 24 shed. I wish it was bigger. A small 2-story barn about now would surely fit the bill. Well, folks, that's the end of the story about the old barn. And as always, I wish everyone all the best.